I mentioned Faith Church Bellefonte. It's kind of strange that we're two faith churches today, and maybe there should be a message in that. We'll see. Andy Morgan moved to Faith Church Bellefonte 9 years ago. He's in his 9th year, I should say it that way. And I heard about it. I heard about the exciting things that were happening. I watched the statistics and saw the numeric growth that was going on, but sensed there was a whole lot more than just numeric growth going on. And recently, I've had the chance to be there every couple of months, almost on a monthly basis anyway, because they're hosting one of the training events we're doing. And I literally know when I walk into the building, I feel energy and the presence of God. And I know that's by design, not accident. And I know God has everything to do with that, but I know that Andy and his team have a great deal to do with that as well. So please welcome Andy and hear his take on leading people to Jesus.
And I wanted to also thank Jake for sharing this morning. He shared a lot of stuff that was really good. And I learned in seminary that if you're going to steal from the best. If you're going to steal ideas, let me put it that way. If you're going to steal ideas, steal from the best. And so not long after I got to Faith Church Bellefonte, we were going through a visioning process, and so we decided that we wanted to get some keywords in there. And so guess what we chose? Connect, serve, grow. See, we weren't good enough for 4 words, because I wasn't going to remember the order. I'm a little older than Jake, so, I wasn't going to be able to remember all of that, and so we just stuck with Connect, Serve, Grow. But we are putting T-shirts together in 4 colors. There you go. So I do want to thank him for that, because it really is a helpful tool and a helpful process. Just real quick, at Faith Church Bellefonte, we don't have big symbols. We don't have a lot of that kind of stuff. And we're still working on that process of getting it kind of ingrained in our DNA. But we connect with God and with one another. We serve Christ. We serve the community. We grow deeper in faith and wider through faith sharing. So that's kind of how we've ordered all of that. And I just wanted to say, and we really did steal that from Faith Church Montoursville, so have at it. So for 23 years, I've been serving the church, and through that whole time, we've talked a lot about church growth. We've talked a lot about making disciples. We've talked a lot about going deeper in our faith. And in fact, when I started as a pastor, our annual conference was using something called the Church Growth Handbook. Anyone been around that long? Church Growth Handbook, Bill Easom. It was actually pretty good. Our church in Bellefonte kind of was one of the churches that kind of the subset of how that was done. We had trainers come in, and it was actually pretty helpful. But through the years, the reality is that the books have changed, and the experts have changed, the programs have changed. But today I want us to kind of focus in and see that the core of what it takes to make disciples and to go deeper in discipleship, the core is always the same. So since I received this coveted time spot, and I want to try to keep you awake, here's what I need you to do. Take out a piece of paper and something to write with, because I need you to write down some words here, okay? Because I'm going to ask you to do an exercise in just a moment, and you're going to need to write these down because we can't get them all on the screen for you to take a look at, okay? So everyone ready? Paper, pencil, all right, pen. Okay, so in 1999, George Barna gave us the habits of highly effective churches. The habits of highly effective churches are genuine worship. This is what you need to write down. Genuine worship, theological growth, holistic stewardship, serving the community, and strategic evangelism. So the Barna research team kind of did all this research, and they said what we found is that churches that are making disciples for the transformation of the world, developing deeper disciples, churches that are growing, however you want to define that, are doing these 5 things: genuine worship, theological growth, holistic stewardship, serving the community, and strategic evangelism. Great stuff, great stuff. Okay, about 9 years later, Bishop Schnase gave us the 5 practices of fruitful congregations. How many of you have read it? Okay, good book, great ideas. And he outlined these 5 practices of congregations that are producing fruit, that are making disciples. His 5 practices, I won't ask you, I will tell you what they are, since you may not remember them. But they are radical hospitality, passionate worship, intentional faith development, risk-taking mission and service, and extravagant generosity. One of the things I love is, the adverbs, adjectives, whichever one it is. I'm not a grammar person, but, radical and passionate and intentional and risk-taking. I just love that part of it. But that's what he outlined as the 5 practices of fruitful congregations. Great stuff. Okay, how many of you are from the Williamsport district? A number of you? Okay, good. Way to go. Williamsport district has been talking about a discipleship network, and they've outlined the roots of deeper discipleship. I am not part of the Williamsport district, but I got some of their material, and so I hope I got this right. You can correct me if I'm wrong. But the roots of deeper discipleship are intentional prayer, a pathway for discipleship, a spiritual core of leadership, connecting with a community, and worship. Did I get them right? Someone from Williamsport tell me? Yes? No? Yes. Okay, good. So you should now have 3 lists of 5 things. And what I'd like you to do is working on your own, working with some people around you. I want you to take those lists, what Barna and what Schnese and what the Williamsport district is doing, and I want you to kind of boil it down, if you would. Boil it down to, I'm going to say, 6 key words. Okay, your time's up. I'm going to just try this here. What 6 words did you come up with? Anyone want to share their 6 words? You have to be willing to share, or this isn't going to work. Okay, in the back there. What are 6 words you get?
Worship, disciple, community, give, share, and love.
Okay. Anyone else? Tina?
Discipleship, worship, growth, stewardship, mission, and prayer.
Okay. Someone else? Pat? Oh, go ahead.
Prayers, presence, gifts, service, witness.
Okay.
I think other people have heard those.
I think they know where those came from, maybe even. Okay, one more. Yeah.
Prayer, worship, community, spirituality, generosity, discipleship.
Okay, good. I'm going to give you my 6. Similar, a little different, but similar. Here are mine. Teaching, fellowship, worship, prayer, stewardship, and service. Pretty much everything that people had outlined since, Barna and all their studies, the 5 habits of, or the 5 practices of fruitful congregations, somehow all boil down to teaching, fellowship, worship, prayer, service, and stewardship. What's interesting is you can find connect, serve, grow in there, which is our grow, teaching, stewardship. We grow in our faith through teaching, stewardship. We connect through fellowship. We connect with God through worship. We connect with God through prayer. Service, we serve. Service, that one's easy. So anyway, take a look at that list. Does that sound at all familiar to anyone? I'm sorry? John Wesley? Okay. Anyone else? Anyone know where that list actually comes from? Larry? Thank you. Acts chapter 2. This is the picture of the early church. Specifically and directly, this is Acts chapter 2. Here's what it says. Acts chapter 2, beginning with verse 42. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread, and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe, and many wonders and signs were performed by the apostles. All the believers were together, and they had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give anyone who had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes. They ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And so this is what the early church did. They were truly a 3D church. They were developing deeper disciples because they were committed to these things. And what's great is that they grew Not because they had this great pathway that they'd come up with or a plan or the most creative ideas of their day. They grew simply because they were doing these things. And we know that they grew because at the very end of that passage, it talks about the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. And so they were a growing church. Now, my question is, why did the early church in the book of Acts, why did they do these things? Why was it that they devoted themselves to these specific ideas or principles or practices? Any guess? You know this. It's because it's what Jesus did. I mean, think about the early church. All they had was Jesus. All they could do was look to Jesus and say, I mean, they're a church and they're like, we don't know what to do. So let's just do what Jesus did. And so when you go back to that list, that's what Jesus did. Jesus taught people. He taught people, in the courts of the synagogue. He taught people along the Sea of Galilee. He probably taught people in homes. He taught people on the hillsides. He taught people in the valley. Jesus just taught people. Jesus was committed to teaching. And in fact, in Mark chapter 1, Jesus is kind of faced with this choice. What's his ministry going to be about? He's doing all these great miracles and healing, and Jesus is like, I could give myself to that. But he says, no, let's go to other villages so that I can teach there also. I can preach there also. And so Jesus was committed to teaching. He was committed to fellowship. He ate in the homes of saints and sinners. He practiced radical hospitality in that he had fellowship with children and tax collectors and prostitutes and scribes and Pharisees. He welcomed them all. And so he was committed to fellowship. He was committed to worship. There are times we find Jesus in the synagogue. He's reading the scripture. Now, of course, he does stand up and say, oh, and by the way, that passage is being fulfilled in me. They didn't like that too much, but he was committed to that. And remember, much of Jewish worship took place in the home. The Passover meal. And so when Jesus is gathered with his disciples and he says, I've eagerly desired to eat this meal with you, what he's saying is, I've wanted to worship with you. And so Jesus was committed to worship. He was committed to prayer. Silent prayer. He was always going off by himself to pray. He was known as a man of prayer. In fact, the disciples came to him, Jesus, you are such an awesome person of prayer. Teach us to pray. So Jesus is like, well, okay. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. And so he was devoted, committed to prayer. He was committed to stewardship. Think about it. Jesus didn't have a lot of financial resources, but what he had, he gave. His time, his love, his knowledge, his life. So he was committed to stewardship. He was committed to service. He fed the hungry. He healed the sick. So the strategy of the early church was just to say, what is it that Jesus did? Because if we are going to follow Jesus, we just need to do what Jesus did. And so they committed themselves to that. And they developed deeper disciples. In themselves, their own life of discipleship grew. They grew in their own faith, but they also were able to, just how they lived, share that with others. And again, you go back to Acts chapter 2, the very last passage there, and the Lord added to their number. God was bringing the people in because the people were doing what Jesus did. So let's think about Jesus for a moment. Jesus was God incarnate. He was the fullness of God. He was the Word of God. He was the pathway, the process, everything that God wanted on how we live. That's who Jesus was. And so Jesus was the fullness of God. He was also the fullness of how God wants us to live. So when we look at Jesus, we see the life that God desires us to live. And so the way that God desires us to live is being devoted to teaching or sharing God's word, and to fellowship, and to worship, and to prayer, and to stewardship, and to service. That's just how God wants us to live. And so Jesus is the fullness of God incarnate. He shows us the kind of life God wants us to live. And so we need to somehow make that life our own. I firmly believe, not just because it's what I think, but because it's what I've experienced, that when we as the church, and I don't mean, the structure or the building, but when the people who make up the church, begin to do what Jesus did, the pathways come, the programs come, the creative ideas come. We grow in our own faith, and God will add to our number those who are being saved. I had to come up with a title, and so I just call this incarnational discipleship. Our discipleship is just to make the life of Jesus our own. It's to do what Jesus did. It's to live the way that Jesus did. And again, I'm convinced if we do that, we make deeper disciples of others. We begin to transform the world. And honestly, I really think this is just what Jesus was calling us to do, and who Jesus was calling us to be. It was Jesus who said, "You are the light of the world." We are to take the light that is Jesus and make it our own and shine in the world. You are the light of the world. You are the salt of the earth. Incarnational discipleship. We take this life of Jesus, we make it our own, and we share that with the world. I think it's what Paul said when Paul said that we are the aroma of Christ in a world that is dying. I love that. Let's be honest. Right now, our world stinks. I mean, it's wretched. And I'm not just talking the political campaign, But it's bad. But we can be the aroma of Christ. Think about worship they had incense on the altar. You think about the pleasing aroma, that we could actually be something pleasing in the world because we've made this life of Jesus, we've made it our own. When we follow Jesus, when we do what Jesus did, when we live the way that Jesus lived, others are going to join us. They're going to see something positive, and they're going to be a part of the movement. And we become 3D. Our churches can become 3D. So what does this look like? Well, I want to show you what this looks like. Several years ago, I attended a worship leaders conference and saw a video that Len Sweet presented that profoundly changed how I view a lot of things: leadership, discipleship, the church. The video that you're going to see talks a lot about first followers. We'll talk about that also, but I want to invite you to look at this video as what it means to be an incarnate disciple, and what it means to have the church kind of involved in incarnational discipleship. So here's what I think this looks like.
If you've learned a lot about leadership and making a movement, then let's watch a movement happen start to finish in under 3 minutes and dissect some lessons. First, of course, a leader needs the guts to stand alone and look ridiculous. But what he's doing is so simple, it's almost instructional. This is key. You must be easy to follow. Now here comes the first follower with a crucial role. He publicly shows everyone else how to follow. Notice how the leader embraces him as an equal. So it's not about the leader anymore, it's about them, plural. Notice how he's calling to his friends to join in. So it takes guts to be a first follower. You stand out and you brave ridicule yourself. Being a first follower is an underappreciated form of leadership. The first follower transforms a lone nut into a leader. If the leader is the flint, the first follower is the spark that really makes the fire. Now here's the second follower. This is a turning point. It's proof the first has done well. Now it's not a lone nut, and it's not two nuts. 3 is a crowd, and a crowd is news. A movement must be public. Make sure outsiders see more than just the leader. Everyone needs to see the followers, because new followers emulate followers, not the leader. Now here come 2 more people, then 3 more immediately. Now we've got momentum. This is the tipping point, and now we have a movement. As more people jump in, it's no longer risky. If they were on the fence before, there's no reason not to join in now. They won't stand out, they won't be ridiculed, and they will be part of the in crowd if they hurry. And over the next minute, you'll see the rest who prefer to stay part of the crowd, because eventually they'd be ridiculed for not joining. And ladies and gentlemen, that is how a movement is made. So let's recap what we've learned. If you are a version of the shirtless dancing guy, all alone, remember the importance of nurturing your first few followers as equals, making everything clearly about the movement, not you. Be public, be easy to follow. But the biggest lesson here, did you catch it? Leadership is overglorified. Yes, it started with the shirtless guy, and he'll get all the credit, but you saw what really happened. It was the first follower that transformed a lone nut into a leader. There's no movement without the first follower. See, we're told that we all need to be leaders, but that would be really ineffective. The best way to make a movement, if you really care, is to courageously follow and show others how to follow. When you find a lone nut doing something great, have the guts to be the first person to stand up and join in.
Yeah, great video, great narration actually to a great perspective of all of that. And so let me share with you, here are the lessons that we can learn from this shirtless dancing guy. Are we willing to stand alone and look ridiculous? Can we be easy to follow? The importance of embracing our first followers. And we're going to talk about all of these, but the importance of embracing first followers. Outsiders will follow the followers, not always the leader. And then the last one, momentum and success. When you get momentum, things are just going to take off. And so it's interesting to think about is, Jesus, you're probably not going to hear this many places. Think about Jesus as the shirtless dancing guy. He stood alone during his life and he was willing to look ridiculous. The religious leaders thought he was crazy. People thought he was crazy. But he fought against all of that and he was willing to stand out and do what he knew he needed to do, to dance to the song that God was playing, to live that life. Jesus was also easy to follow. And I don't mean, doing miracles. Yeah, you can look at that and say, well, I can't heal the sick. Well, I can't either. But think about what Jesus did. He welcomed people. He blessed children. He went out of his way to interact with those kind of on the outside of society, on the margins. He forgave people. He ate with people. Hey, I can eat with people. Oh, I love that. He was easy to follow. Jesus embraced his first followers. We call them the disciples. Jesus intentionally gathered some people in around him, and he embraced them and he nurtured them. And even among the disciples, there was kind of the inner circle, and they were really the first followers of Jesus. The first four people called, the four fishermen, Peter, Andrew, James, and John, even within that, the first followers that Jesus really encouraged were Peter, James, and John. I have to say, I've always felt bad for Andrew. Like, what happened to him? Like, why was he kind of cast out of the little inner circle there? I take that personally, just, my namesake, but even Jesus, he nurtured his first followers. Maybe one of the reasons Jesus did that is that he knew at some point in time in the movement they were going to follow the followers and not him. So he picked people who were going to be easy to follow. Hey, I'm going to pick fishermen because they don't have it all together, and people will be able to identify with that. Outsiders are going to follow the followers. The church in Acts, Jesus physically is no longer there anymore. The body of Jesus, the life of Jesus was no longer there, and so people are now following the followers. How important that is when we think about ourselves as followers of Jesus. People are going to begin to follow the followers. Paul even said, "Follow me as I follow Christ." And so it's okay for us to say, hey, people need to follow us. We just need to make sure that we are following Jesus. And then there's momentum and success, the movement of Jesus. Yeah, there was momentum. We've seen success, but let's also remember that there was also persecution and there were struggles and there were hardships in there, but there was momentum and there was success. It's a movement that's, literally worldwide. And so if incarnational discipleship is doing what Jesus did and leading like Jesus, then how do we use that video to talk about developing deeper disciples? Well, are we willing to stand alone and look ridiculous in the living out of our faith? While all the strategies and ideas that we're going to hear, all the great kind of conversations that we're hearing today, great ideas, are we actually going to be willing to step out and put that into practice, knowing that just suggesting it is going to make us look ridiculous in our church, let alone in our community? So are we willing to take one of these ideas, take what we think God is calling us to do, and to step out there and do it? One of the things that we need to remember is if we're going to do that, we may fail, and we may fail big time. What you don't see in that shirtless dancing guy video is the 4 minutes of raw footage before that started. 4 minutes of this guy doing that crazy dance, trying to get people to dance with him, and every single one of them thought he was crazy and walked away. In fact, one of the people, there are different angles of that. One of the people videotaping the crazy dancing, I call him the crazy dancing guy, shirtless dancing guy, one of the people videotaping them, they were counting how many people would walk away from him. And what's funny is by the end of the video, they're wanting to go out and join him. So we're going to stand out there and look ridiculous. Well, we may fail. We may really look ridiculous. And even the people within our congregations who may not get it are going to struggle with that. But are we willing to stand out alone and look ridiculous in the living out of our faith? Whatever we're willing to do, are we willing to make it easy for people to follow? Prayer, teaching, service. If we somehow say, well, you have to be, set aside and special to do those things, people aren't going to be able to follow us. But if we can make it easy, if the way that we're living out our life makes it easy, then other people are going to be able to join in the movement. We need to nurture our first followers. As leaders in the church, and if you are here today, you are a leader. So the leaders in the church, we need to understand the importance of nurturing those first followers. And those are the people who, when you have an idea, they're the ones who are willing to stand there with you and say, that's a great idea. Now, they may be thinking, you are crazy and it's not going to work, but they're saying, that's a great idea. And so we need to nurture them. As pastors, it's important. If we come up with this, new idea, we're new in a church and we want to try something new, and we go out there, if there's someone who's willing to join us in that, man, we need to meet with them and pray with them and work with them because they're going to be our biggest asset. But pastors, please hear this. The shirtless dancing guy and girl may be the lady of your church who come up with these wonderful ideas that are so ridiculous we think they're not going to work. Can we be their first followers? Can we be the ones who will just walk up to Our Lady and say, that is an awesome idea. What can I do to help you with that? How can we work together on that? But we need to nurture first followers, and it's sometimes, as leaders, we also need to be those first followers. It's often the first followers who are going to draw other people in. Once a few people are on board, it begins to be accepted by other people. And you're all going to find there's going to be that one person when they join this movement, everyone else in the church is not going to be able to speak against it because they're part of it. You know those people? In Altoona, her name was Jackie Ross. I don't know, is Matt here somewhere? Matt, there you are. No. Matt's not even here? Where's Matt? Okay, Matt followed me in Altoona, so I'm disappointed. Matt, thank you. Anyway, Jackie Ross was that person. If Jackie Ross spoke in favor of something, no one's going to speak up against her. In Lewisburg, it was Betty and Paul Drees, and I know Janice is here. Janice's parents, actually. And when they actually got on board with something, you didn't want to mess with Betty Drees. I did not want to mess with Betty Drees. Thank God she was willing to be a part of some of the ideas that we had there. But people are going to follow the followers, and we as leaders need to understand that. And then there's momentum and success. Once things get going, people aren't going to speak against something positive. In fact, people are going to want to be part of that. So that's kind of what incarnational discipleship looks like. When we follow Jesus, when we in our own personal lives are willing to make the life of Jesus our own, step out there and do that, it begins a process of discipleship in our own lives, but also in the lives and in the hearts of others. And so it all starts with people and leaders in churches who are being willing to look to Jesus and to do what Jesus did. And if you are here today and you are a leader in the church, you can go 3D. You can, develop deeper disciples. You can do that. You can do that in your life, in your own personal life, and you can do that in your church simply by making the decision to do what Jesus did. It's not always about the right strategy or idea, or you can't sit there and say, well, we're just a small church, so we can't do that. This is about people in any size church, but it's also about us personally saying, what can I do to look more like Jesus? What song is playing that I can get up and dance to? Because I'm telling you right now, there is music playing in every community. And there's a song playing in every congregation. In his book, The Purpose-Driven Church, Rick Warren talks about spiritual waves. He says, as leaders, sometimes we need to just understand the waves of God that are coming at us. We do not create those waves. God does. We need to know how God is moving so that we can be a part of it. And the music context, there is a song playing. We don't sing, we don't make the song. That's God. God sends the music. Are we willing, when we hear the song, are we willing to get up and dance? Because if we're willing to do that, and if we're willing to look ridiculous and invite other people to be a part of it and nurture those people and develop that, a movement will start. I believe this passionately because I have seen this in all of the churches that I've served. When I was in Altoona, the music that we had was actually a song for children. And this was my shout out to Matt, so when you see Matt, you can tell him that I did mention this. Anyway, I served a church in 2nd Avenue in Altoona, and when I arrived at the church, there wasn't a lot of outreach into the community, but there were a lot of kids who were far from the church. And one Sunday morning, I show up at church, and we had, those big traditional red doors, and the red door frames was all wood, beautiful kind of doors. And I was opening and unlocking doors one day, and I thought, someone's written something on the door frames of the church. I'm like, great, vandalism Saturday night. So I go and I look at what they had written, and they were the names of the kids in our community. The kids had written their names on the doorpost of the church. And so I thought, well, at least it's in chalk, thank you, God, so I can wipe it off before people freak out when they come into worship. And so as I'm wiping the names off the doorframe of the church, I just hear God, it wasn't an audible voice, but I just hear God say, Andy, they're writing their names on the door frame of the church. I want their names written in the book of life. What are you going to do? Were we going to be willing to, the song was playing. It's a song for kids, were we willing to step out and look ridiculous? Well, we did some things to do that. We decided, okay, we have an opportunity with our Vacation Bible School to really make it for the community. And so we held this Vacation Bible School. We gathered all the people together, and I looked at all of our leaders that year, and I said, okay, I'm not a children's ministry organizer kind of person, but I just have one requirement for all of you. If you want, and this is worth writing down, by the way, so if you want to write this down. If you want to make your Vacation Bible School successful, there's only one thing you need to do. And I looked at all the leaders and I said, this is what we need to do. We need to have fun. I don't care if we teach about Jesus. I do, obviously. It's important to do that. But if we have fun as leaders, if we have fun, the kids will have fun. And they're going to want to come back. And we're going to get to know them. And we're going to be able to build relationships with them. So we just had a blast. And my job, I was like the fun maker. I just went around and helped people have fun, the leaders have fun. Midway through that Vacation Bible School, a woman came to me, and she caught me in the hallway leading up to the 3rd floor. And she said, Andy, the building is happy. I'm like, okay, you're having a little too much fun. Don't know what you're... Yeah, anyway. So I said, yeah, it's great. There's a lot going on. And she goes, no, the building is happy. And if we don't keep this going, we're going to lose all the relationships with the children. I was like, okay, what do you want to do? What do you think we should do? She goes, I think we should keep Vacation Bible School going through the rest of the summer. Okay, there is a crazy dancing lady in my church right now. And I have an opportunity. What am I going to do? And so I looked at her and I said, well, okay, I tell you what, if you get the kids to come back, I'll give you all the help you need. I have the opportunity to be a first follower. I said, you go, and I will give you all the support. And I told her to the day I left 2nd Avenue that she always kept her end of the bargain. She always got the kids there. I never got her enough help. We never had enough help. It was a great movement. But it was because there was one person who was out there listening. And so at the end of the summer, she came to me again and she goes, Andy, this is great, but if we end it now, we're going to lose our relationship with these kids, because they didn't come to church. They just came to our Vacation Bible School. And I said, okay, what do you want to do? And she goes, I think we should keep it going. And what does that look like? And she goes, I think we just need Vacation Bible School one night a week through the whole year. Okay. And so we kept it going. We expanded it out and we provided dinner. We expanded it out and we had an after-school session. And 20-some years later, The Rock, an after-school program at 2nd Avenue, is still going strong. They've added computer ministries. I mean, this is where Matt just took it and ran with it. They added computer ministries. They added a clothing bank. They actually got funding from the Bill and Gloria Gates Foundation. I don't know how you do that, but they were awesome. And it all started because there was one person who was hearing this song of God, was willing to step out and dance, and there were people who were willing to follow that. That's what this incarnational discipleship looks like. So 9 years later, I am serving a congregation in Lewisburg. And St. Paul's in Lewisburg sits about 4 blocks from Bucknell University. And when I got there, I started asking some questions about how many students from Bucknell came to our church. And I will never forget the answer that they gave me. They said, every once in a while, a student wanders through. Think about that. Every once in a while, a student wanders through, like in and out. I was like, wow, that's just sad. How can we, the idea started, how could we reach students? Well, I became a Christian through InterVarsity Christian Fellowship. So I just went and I started trying to find out if there was an InterVarsity chapter at Bucknell. I met the leaders, I met some students, we listened to the students, and we said, okay, what could we do to support you? What could we do to help you? And one of them said, we'd love a worship service, a contemporary worship service, because there isn't one in Lewisburg. And so we kind of toyed with the idea, and we put a small group together to talk about the idea. And we had changed our administrative structure a little bit, so all of our groups were meeting on the same night, and which means the pastor can't be at all of them, which is okay. And so I was with that little small group talking about a new worship service. And those of you pastors or churches, starting a new worship service is not easy, and it creates a lot of conflict. So they're talking about it, and I had to get up and leave to go to another meeting. And when I came back, they said to me, Andy, we're going to start this new service on this day, and this person's going to do hospitality, this person's doing music, this person's going to get all the students there. All we need you to do is preach. And I'm like, whoa, what is going on here? And those of you who were in that meeting can attest to that. I'm freaking out. I'm like, time out. We have to talk about this more. I mean, they were hearing the song. They were willing to get up and dance. And I just had a decision to make. Would I go along with that? Would I be their first follower? Well, it was hard, but I said, okay. And so we started, and it turned into what we called the river. We stood alone and looked ridiculous. How many people do a worship service at 12 noon on Sunday in Lewisburg? In Lewisburg, anyone know Lewisburg community? 12 noon, where's everyone in Lewisburg? Country Cupboard, that's right. You want to do worship, you go to Country Cupboard and do that. You're going to have the whole community there. But we did it at 12 noon, and people said, why 12 noon? I'm like, have you talked to college students? Sunday morning, they're not going to get up at 8, 9, 10, or 11. We were pushing it at 12. But we listened to them enough, and we knew that if we ended somewhat on time, they could still get to the cafeteria. They could still get like brunch. And it worked. And it worked for us. And it all started because there was a group of people who were willing to kind of hear that music, and they were willing to step out and dance to it. One more quick story from my congregation in Bellefonte. When I arrived in Bellefonte, that church was just humming. I just stepped into a wonderful location, and they were really involved in the community. And so I didn't even need to talk about missions or outreach because they just had it going on. I just had to let them do it. But about a year ago, I realized in my own life I was not serving. I wasn't serving in the community. The congregation was, but I personally wasn't. I was wrestling with that. I'm like, I've got to find something that I just personally can do. And I was wrestling with that, and a phone call came into the office that the ladies who were doing our soup kitchen once a month were struggling because they now had to mop the floor. Before, the custodian at the church in Bellefonte was doing that, but they didn't have the money to pay the custodian to do it, and so they were asking all of the volunteers to do that. And they're like, Andy, we're sorry, but we're just not able to do that. I was like, it's okay, we'll find someone. And I told the secretary, don't find anyone, I'll do it. Because I thought, this is my opportunity to serve. This is my opportunity to kind of connect with a whole segment of the community that I just don't spend enough time with, and I wanted to do that. And so I went and I mopped the floor that month, and it was great, and I was ready to go back again. At the same time, we were transitioning that ministry. A new person had gotten involved. They wanted some some more volunteers. And so I talked about it in my announcement. I said, this is one of the best things that we do as a church, and I've been down there, and these people are great, and if you're interested in doing that, help. And about a week later, I get a phone call saying, Andy, that was really great. We don't need your help anymore. I'm like, what? It's like, we don't need you to mop the floor anymore. We have so many volunteers. I'm like, how does that happen? How does that happen? It's just one person stepping out and saying, I'm just going to do what God calls me to do, and I'm just going to trust that God is somehow going to use that to develop develop me as a deeper disciple, but also develop the congregation. And so in each church, we just practiced what I call incarnational discipleship. We did what we felt Jesus calling us to do. In Altoona, it was with children. In Lewisburg, it was with students. In Bellefonte, it was how we served the community. And I have to tell you, every church has grown through those processes. As a leader, there were times that I had to embrace the first followers, and there were times that there were amazing lay people who were willing to embrace the ideas that I brought in. But we were just doing what God was calling us to do. And here's the great thing about this. It doesn't matter what size church you're in, because this is not about a church program. It's about the people of the church. We are the church. It's about the followers of Jesus just stepping out to do what Jesus did. So if you're a church of 6 or 16 or 60 or 600, every church can do this. And it's simply saying, well, what can we do to do what Jesus did? So if you go back to that list of the things that Jesus did, teaching and fellowship and worship and serving. What can you do to just get out there and do that? Teaching. Every person here could start a Bible study. You can start a Bible study, and you can name it Bible Study for Dummies, because I don't know anything about it, and so I'm going to lead it. You can do that. The leader does not have to have all the answers, and you can do it in your church, you can do it in your community, you can go to the Fresh Expressions. I'm going to give you a shout out. Go to the Fresh Expressions seminar and learn how to do it in a bar, because that's awesome, because that's where truth and grace and the power of God is often needed. And so you can start a Bible study. In Lewisburg, or in Altoona, they started a Bible study. The women wanted to start a Bible study, and again, I'm often the first follower. I don't have all the ideas, so I'm often the first follower. These women said, Andy, we want to do a women's Bible study. I'm like, great, do it. We want to do it at your house. I'm like, why? Why do you want to do it at my house? I'm a single pastor. Why do you want to do it at my house? Because no one will find us there, and it's a home, and we don't have to have it ready and clean. And I was like, great. So I cleaned my house, and every Monday I went off to a movie, and they had Bible study at my house. You can start teaching. You can do that. Fellowship. We can all be involved in fellowship. I mean, it's not a program. It's not, a pathway. Fellowship, it looks like this. It's seeing someone maybe new in your church, worship service, and it's just going up and talking to them. Or it's inviting your neighbor to come to some activity that is going on at your church. Or it's starting a conversation with someone. It's welcoming someone in your community. There's a wonderful story of my church in Bellefonte where there was a woman who came there years ago, started in the church years ago with a lot of young children. And she came in and, kids were kids, in worship, and she had her hands full, and someone walked up to her, and instead of saying, we have a nursery, don't ever say that to someone, or, we have children's church if you want to, yes, we need to offer that, but you know what I mean. So anyway, a woman came up and said, it just looks like you have your hands full, and probably, meals during the week are really hard. Can I bring a cake to your house for your family? And the woman's like, in tears, yes, that'd be great. Do you know what that woman's doing today? She's heading up the food bank in Bellefonte. Someone reached out to her with food, and now it's become this passion of hers to make sure people in need have food. We can all take part in that some way, in fellowship, in that radical hospitality. And worship, we can all be involved in worship. And I'm not talking about making a new worship service. I'm not talking about transitioning your worship service. I'm not talking about any kind of worship changes. I'm talking about how we can vitalize worship. And I'm going to tell you how to do that. And is Jake still here? Oh, there you are. Okay, so you said earlier this morning, I don't know how to tell you to be good at worshiping, so I'm going to tell you how to do that, okay? And as I'm telling him, all of you can listen. So there is one thing that you all can do tomorrow to radically change your worship service. You can go there and be happy. You can go there excited to be with your fellow worshipers, and you can look like you're having fun. Because if you will go to worship and say, I really enjoy being with this group of people, and if you have to fake it, but I really... You know the expression, fake it till you make it, right? So if you have to do that, do that. But if you will just enjoy that experience, it will radically change your worship. Picture the kids coming down for children's sermons, if you do a children's sermon. You know how kids come running down front? I want y'all to go running into your church tomorrow like, I am so happy to be here. It will radically, okay, some of you may not want to run there, but, and make sure there are ramps so that you don't trip over the step, but it can radically change your worship simply by having a heart that desires to be with God's people. Prayer, we can all make prayer the priority of our lives. We can all be involved in prayer. We can all be involved in stewardship. If you're not tithing, tithe. Share that experience. Talk about it. If you're already tithing, can I suggest a reverse tithe? 1 month, give 90% away and live on 10. If that's not going to develop a deeper disciple, I don't know what will. So stewardship, service, do something. Do something in your church, do something in your community. Because I'm telling you right now, God is already playing the music. There's already something going on in your community. You don't have to start it. You don't have to program it. You don't have to run it. Just find something in your community. And as a pastor, as a layperson, as a family, just serve. Just go and do it. Commit yourself to doing it. I don't know how it worked in Bellefonte that I went 1 week and then the whole thing was planned, but it worked. Just get involved and serve. You know, hearing what other people are doing in ministry is great. It gets us thinking in new ways. All of that is really good. Seeing the pathways is really helpful. Seeing what's worked in other areas is a good thing, and it gets our creative juices going. But at some point in time, we have to make it our own. We have to make this life of Jesus our own. And when every person who claims to be a follower of Jesus really starts doing what Jesus did, when we're willing to step out and look ridiculous, and nurture those who are willing to come to us, a movement begins. A movement begins in us, and a movement begins in others. We develop deeper disciples in ourselves, in our families, and we develop deeper disciples in our community. The incarnation was Jesus coming to be this shirtless dancing guy, showing us how to live, showing us how to be in mission and in ministry. If we will step out and follow him, things are going to change. We're going to grow deeper. So what I really hope is that today and all the days to come, that you're just going to start to hear the music, that you're going to start to hear the music playing, and then that you'll get up and dance. Thank you.